June 25, 2021 marked the moment Derek Chauvin's life split into before and after. Standing in a Minneapolis courtroom, Judge Peter Cahill delivered a sentence that would define Chauvin's existence from that day forward. 22.5 years in state prison for the murder of George Floyd. The numbers were read aloud with clinical precision. 270 months, an upward departure from the standard guideline, but the meaning behind them was far heavier than arithmetic. A former police officer stood still, hands cuffed behind him, expression flat, as the weight of decades settled in. What began in that moment was not simply incarceration, but the start of a psychological sentence most people will never truly comprehend until they are trapped inside it. That punishment would only deepen. Chauvin later received an additional 21 years on federal civil rights convictions, ordered to run concurrently. Together, the sentences sealed his fate in a way that raises an unsettling question. Is a punishment without a clear ending more cruel than one that ends in death? The cameras captured every angle of the courtroom. Victim impact statements described a man who extinguished a life while pleas echoed around him. George Floyd's family spoke of trauma that replays endlessly, the video of his death looping in their minds without relief. But there is a symmetry here that rarely gets examined. Chauvin's sentence creates its own endless loop, one measured not in minutes of suffering, but in decades of confinement. For much of the public, the sentence felt like justice. But sentencing is only the threshold. The real punishment begins when the courtroom empties and the convicted vanishes into a system built not to heal, but to contain. What does life actually look like across decades behind bars? And why do some inmates sentenced to death eventually beg for execution rather than endure permanent captivity? Chauvin was first housed at Minnesota's Oak Park Heights, the state's highest security prison. From the outset, protective custody was unavoidable. Former law enforcement officers occupy one of the most dangerous positions in prison culture. That protection, however, comes at a severe cost. His days were structured around isolation, up to 23 hours locked inside a cell scarcely larger than a parking space, with limited human contact and tightly controlled movement. This was not temporary. This was the rhythm of life stretching forward with no clear endpoint. The human brain is not built for this. Studies on prolonged isolation show patterns of severe psychological deterioration. Paranoia, hallucinations, emotional blunting, impulse loss, and dissociation from one's own identity. Over time, the self erodes. You stop being a person and become a number. This isn't metaphor, it's neurological adaptation. Many states now acknowledge long-term solitary confinement as potentially unconstitutional. Yet for high-profile inmates, protective custody often recreates the same conditions under a different name. Chauvin's notoriety ensures he can never safely blend into a general population. That reality followed him when he was transferred to federal custody. In November 2023, while incarcerated at a federal facility in Arizona, he was attacked and stabbed multiple times by another inmate. He survived, but the incident confirmed what prison officials already knew. Permanent isolation was not optional, it was necessary. And so the paradox deepens. The system must protect him, but that protection inflicts a form of psychological damage that borders on torture. Unlike a death sentence, which at least contains a theoretical endpoint, life imprisonment stretches forward without resolution. Chauvin will become eligible for parole after serving roughly 2/3 of his state sentence, sometime in the mid-2030s. By then, he will be in his mid-60s. He will sit before a parole board and argue that he deserves release. And almost certainly, he will be denied. Then, every 2 years, the process will repeat. Prepare. Hope. Be rejected. Repeat. This cycle transforms hope into a weapon. Research into prison psychology shows that repeatedly offering and withdrawing hope can be more damaging than hopelessness itself. Inmates who accept permanence often adapt better than those who are forced to relive disappointment again and again. For a figure as politically radioactive as Chauvin, parole is not simply a legal decision, it is a public one. No board or governor wants their name attached to releasing the man whose actions ignited global protests. The optics alone ensure denial. Death row inmates often describe uncertainty as the worst part of their experience. But in truth, they possess something lifers do not: finality. Life imprisonment offers the illusion of possibility while quietly ensuring it never arrives. This isn't mercy, it's prolonged erosion. Had Chauvin faced the death penalty, something Minnesota does not allow, His punishment would have included years of appeals but ultimately a defined conclusion. Many argue life imprisonment is more humane than execution, but that argument often ignores what life in prison actually entails. Decades of restricted movement, institutional food, accelerated aging, minimal autonomy, and the slow disappearance of personal identity. Who is Derek Chauvin now? Not morally, but existentially. In 2021, he was a 45-year-old man with a career, a home, relationships, and autonomy. Within months, all of that vanished. His marriage ended. His assets disappeared. His identity as a police officer, the core structure of his adult life, ceased to exist. Prison doesn't merely take freedom. It strips away every external marker of individuality. Clothing, schedules, meals, movement, everything becomes uniform. Neuroscience confirms that prolonged exposure to such environments reshapes the brain. After 20 years, the person who emerges, if they emerge at all, is not the same individual who entered. Life imprisonment means watching yourself become someone you no longer recognize, in real time. Philosophers refer to this as civil death, a state where a person is biologically alive but socially erased. Chauvin cannot meaningfully participate in society, vote, own property, raise children, or exercise control over his daily existence. He exists, but only as a managed body. This is not theoretical. Many inmates have voluntarily abandoned appeals and requested execution, stating plainly that death was preferable to endless captivity. They were not irrational. They were calculating which punishment inflicted less suffering. Chauvin does not get that choice. Minnesota abolished the death penalty over a century ago. His federal sentence, though severe, did not pursue execution. So he remains locked into a form of punishment that extends suffering indefinitely while allowing society to claim moral superiority for avoiding execution. If prolonged isolation causes measurable psychological harm, then we must ask whether we are engaging in cruelty under a different label. The Constitution forbids cruel and unusual punishment, yet decades of isolation remain routine for inmates like Chauvin. Outside the prison walls, the world has moved on. George Floyd's death reshaped history, policing, and global conversations on race. Chauvin has become a symbol, an idea. But symbols don't age, don't fall ill, don't sit alone in a cell marking time. The man does. Life imprisonment is not about rehabilitation in cases like this. Even genuine remorse would not alter his fate. The punishment is symbolic, retributive, and permanent. That may feel justified, but we should be honest about what it is. As of late 2025, Chauvin remains in federal custody, largely forgotten by the news cycle, adapting as long-term inmates do, by shrinking their world to survive. Days blur into years. Health declines faster behind bars. Studies show prisoners age prematurely, their bodies breaking down earlier than those on the outside. By the time Chauvin is even considered for parole, he may already be physically diminished, navigating chronic illness within an under-resourced prison medical system. Release, even if granted, would come too late to resemble freedom. The uncomfortable conclusion is this: life imprisonment, especially under conditions of isolation, may inflict greater suffering than execution ever could. Acknowledging that does not excuse the crime, minimize George Floyd's death, or argue for leniency. It simply demands honesty about the punishment we impose. Execution ends suffering. Life imprisonment extends it indefinitely. We often label the latter as humane without fully confronting its reality. Chauvin will likely die in custody, slowly, quietly, and far from public attention. He will watch the world change from behind reinforced walls, frozen in the moment of his crime. His punishment will continue long after public outrage fades. So the final question remains: is life imprisonment truly the moral alternative we believe it is? Or have we created a slower, quieter form of ultimate punishment while telling ourselves it represents progress? That question has no easy answer, but it is one we should not avoid.